All right, folks, welcome to Coffee Chats. My name is Gary Clark, President and CEO of Economic Alliance Snohomish County, and I am excited because we get to come back to having these coffee chats after what I'm hoping everyone had was an amazing Thanksgiving vacation. So I would like to move this forward quickly with what you all know is our housekeeping items. So please make sure that you've added your organization name to your screen. And then also, please make sure that you engage us because there will be a host of questions and comments that you'll want to engage on here as we dive in. And again, thank you for joining us. Now, I have the distinct pleasure of inviting and introducing number one, CEO of Community Transit, Rick Ilgenfritz, and Rick is on with us as well. And Thomas Tumula is also here with us, and he's the manager of planning and development under Community Transit. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I would like to quickly share with you all one thing about Rick, though. Obviously, he has been CEO for a little bit of time here at Community Transit, but Rick comes from a huge, tremendous transit background with Sound Transit as well as DEA, which is David Evans and Associates. So Rick has also been very helpful in just engaging me as I've tried to get my feet wet here in Snohomish County. So Rick, thank you for joining us. Thomas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Great. Well, should we just take it away then?
Yes, it's your show.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Gary, and thanks to everybody for joining here on a dark and rainy Tuesday morning after the Thanksgiving holiday. I hope everyone had a great break and time with family and feasting and festivity. And now here we are back at it. So if you are into moving people or curious about how people get around and how transit serves the community, then this is the coffee chat for you. And we're so glad to have you here because there's so much going on. I wanted to say a few things by way of introduction and then recognize Thomas to deliver a presentation on the work we're doing to update our network here in Snohomish County as part of our preparation for the opening of the Linwood Link project in 2024. So let me just sort of set the context for that. We are really sitting here in a moment of historic change in terms of regional mobility. Everybody watched, and I'm sure many of you participated in the opening of the Northgate segment in early October, as Sound Transit added 3 new stations to the system as it makes its way north up the I-5 corridor towards Snohomish County. And that was super exciting, and it was very successful. And we initiated some changes to our service, both to take advantage of that and also to begin to up our game with respect to transit integration and figure out how to get better at providing multimodal connections and multimodal service here in the region. And really for us, that was a learning opportunity for the main event in Snohomish County, which is really just 2.5 years away. The Linwood Link project, any of you who drive up and down past through Snohomish County on I-5, past all that construction, see it taking shape every day. I was fortunate at the beginning of last week to be able to take a walking tour around the Montlake Terrace station area with Congressman Rick Larson, my counterpart at Sound Transit, Peter Rogoff, and Mayor Matsumoto Wright. And we celebrated the 50% milestone of completion of that project. And it's going very fast. So what we're going to see here in the next 3 years regionally is not just the opening of the Linwood Link extension, but the opening of 19 more central link stations around the region. 4 between Linwood and Northgate, 3 between SeaTac Airport and Federal Way, and 12 on the east side, stretching from Mercer Island all the way out to downtown Redmond. And this is really going to revolutionize our network, because what you'll see here is a rail system picking up the load in the most heavily traveled corridors, so that the bus providers like Community Transit and Everett Transit and King County Metro can reset their networks and redeploy the resources they're devoting to those longer commuter routes to more robust service at the local level and more reach of the system within the local network. And so we're doing that work right now. We have kicked off a planning process to look at how we can update our network to take advantage of the arrival of rail to improve bus service within the county. And Thomas is going to walk through that process. It's a public facing process. We are looking for input. We have a survey open on our website right now to gain an initial round of public input to inform our network changes. And then we're going to go through a planning process and bring some ideas forward for people to comment on next year before we set and restructure that network in advance of 2024. So there's other stuff going on as well that is equally impactful at this time. We've just kicked off a zero emission vehicle study. You've all heard about the bipartisan infrastructure package that passed back in Congress. And we are positioning to take advantage of a major investment that new law is going to be making in zero emission technology, both vehicles and infrastructure. We are also piloting a pilot project in the city of Linwood beginning next year, which will look at providing on-demand microtransit service to pick people up and bring them to the transit system, whether it's fixed route bus service or light rail service. We are going to try to crack the nut of that last mile conundrum. Most transit agencies assume people are going to come to them. We put service out there, we put bus stops, we put train stations, and we assume that people are going to come to us, and then we're going to move them around. This pilot project is going to look at changing that philosophy and trying to figure out, can we go to them? Can we go get them and bring them into the system? Can we change the rider experience, the user experience, to make transit an easier choice for people to make? So those are two other initiatives along with the 2024 network planning that we're undertaking. And then one final initiative on the back end of all this is we'll be updating our long range plan to extend our planning horizon out to 2050 to match up with the regional planning horizon that PSRC undertakes. And that'll give us an opportunity, once we set this new network in place, to look even further ahead to what transit in Snohomish County will look like when light rail gets all the way up to Everett. And we've implemented new technologies and new service types. So lots going on. It's a very exciting time, especially for transit nerds among us. And we're so eager to share what we have cooking and tell you how you can participate. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Thomas to walk through the particulars.
Thank you, Rick. And can everyone see my screen? Okay. So just kind of as a prelude to coming attractions here, Rick was mentioning with the Northgate extension, this is a pretty big undertaking with several agencies over the last couple of years to kind of make this go live October 2nd, earlier this fall. We're learning a lot from this new opportunity. You know, obviously ridership is way different than it was 2 years ago because of the pandemic, but it continues to evolve. You know, on an average weekday at Northgate Station on our community transit operated routes, we're serving about 26 boardings and alightings, which is, you know, a pretty heavy flow of traffic coming in the morning. These were primarily our University of Washington routes, or 800 series buses. You could see there in the photo, it making a tight right turn there into the intermodal area of Northgate Station. A lot of interesting things to observe, a lot of little micro changes that happen in the field. Things are going to probably be pretty status quo out there until 2023, when the Eastlink service to Bellevue and Redmond would open up at Northgate, providing more access to more destinations for Snohomish County residents, and also higher frequency service at Northgate Station for Link Light Rail. So kind of jumping ahead from 2023 to 2024, Link Light Rail will be arriving in Snohomish County, and that really allows us to free up a lot of what we call service hours or resources. Those are miles and hours of bus resources and operators that we put out there on the street to provide service into King County. That service is very much long distance, but also very unpredictable because of traffic on Seattle city streets, also on I-5. So that allows us to reinvest those resources in new mobility opportunities. And our whole program here is underpinned by travel made easy for all. So when Link Light Rail arrives here, you can see in this picture, we're going to be, right now we have a Northgate Station interface with some of our bus system, what we call the 400 series bus routes. Those are the express buses, the iconic double tall or double decker buses that go to downtown Seattle. They're still operating past Northgate Station. This will allow us and One Sound Transit route to sort of pull that back towards Linwood and kind of reinvest in that northern area that you see here on the map. So what's the big deal about light rail? Well, light rail is kind of a 3D solution for a 3D world. It allows us to sort of have predictable, uninterrupted travel times and quick travel times to multiple regional destinations. Those could be places where Snohomish County residents are just walking off the train to a destination, whether it's like University of Washington, downtown Seattle, or Redmond Overlake, but allows us to sort of have real solid trip times throughout the day, and that kind of show and go level of service where you don't even need to consult the schedule. It's high capacity. Bikes don't have to go in the rack. They can just go right on board. One 4-car train can hold about 800 riders at crush capacity, and then there's room for other things like suitcases pretty easily. So kind of jumping into kind of the planning process of kind of how we're remapping our system. We're sort of in this initial phase 1 effort here late in 2021. As Rick was mentioning, we have an active initial outreach process with a survey that's I'll touch on at the end of the presentation. We're just kind of in the phase of developing service concepts to support this kind of new paradigm. Next year is where the real heavy work begins, where we actually are going to have a formal draft network out for public review in the spring time frame, and the goal is to get to a decision point around this time next year. And the Community Transit Board would be actually taking action to approve our new network plan, with implementation kind of spread out between 2023, 2024, and perhaps another year beyond. So going into this process, we have 4 primary service goals that kind of start the conversation and start the design work. The one is probably pretty self-evident. It's connecting bus to light rail. We also want to expand access to frequent service. Kind of our standard, fixed bus route cycle or wait time between buses is every 30 to 6 minutes. Kind of looking at expanding that 15-minute service. That's that really reliable kind of service where you don't have to consult the schedule. Expanding that network kind of in other locales in Snohomish County. We're adjusting a changing market, not just because of rapid development within Snohomish County and light rail coming in Snohomish County. We're also kind of looking back at kind of how things have changed with the pandemic and what new essential trips have appeared, but also looking how the market is shifting as we're actually undertaking this planning work. And ensuring equitable access, it's kind of got 2 facets to it. One is definitely in the outreach process, how we engage communities and how we publish our materials, but also embedding that philosophy into the actual analysis process up front. So it's not just a compliance exercise that's done at the back end, it's actually kind of baked into the analysis from day one. And again, this is all underpinned by travel made easy for all. So kind of how did we get here? I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. There's a lot of content on this slide, but there's a lot of, regional plans that's kind of set as the sort of foundation for a lot of this work. There's the PSRC Vision 2050, which is kind of the region's integrated land use and transportation plan, Sound Transit 2 and 3, extending light rail to Linwood and Everett, our own Prop 1 several years back, which, you know, gave us some more resources and some more strategies to kind of develop our network, you know, restoring service throughout the weekend and expanding our commuter routes have been two big efforts since that point. And our own long range plan, which is actually going to be updated over the next year or so to kind of look more strategically ahead. There's been a lot of internal collaboration, but we've shifted gears this fall to kind of reaching out to partner agencies, community groups, and also the customers and the public. There's a lot of data-driven decisions here. Instead of kind of operating based on kind of what we did in the past or sort of lore, looking really at data and using modern analytics. We actually had a cell phone data study done in 2019 that looks at kind of where all origins and destinations of trips are occurring throughout the day in Snohomish County. And most importantly, we're aligning to industry best practice, so following standards, procedures, and practices. A lot of agencies like LA Metro, Houston Metro, and some of the smaller agencies like in Little Rock, Arkansas, have really kind of been on the forefront, have done new network reboot plans and recast their whole system. So we're kind of trying to follow kind of the lead from some of the best that have done this lately. So kind of, you know, transit's kind of like a food pyramid. So at the bottom here on the screen, you have light rail and BRT. That is sort of the sort of medium to high capacity transit that is reliable, frequent, runs, you know, from 5 a.m. until almost midnight every day of the week. Then kind of above that would be express routes, which have more capacity than a typical route that may run just peak period, peak direction. We're also looking at some of them running throughout the day and perhaps even throughout the week. I think the bread and butter is always going to be local routes. These serve a variety of different trips and provide more neighborhood access and are probably the most familiar kind of route in Snohomish County. And last and certainly not least, at the top here are new service options like micro transit, sort of zonal on-demand service to fill gaps. So kind of the cornerstone of this would be expanded frequent service. So we do have some of this today, but it's primarily our blue and green Swift routes. We'll be expanding this to the Swift orange line in 2024, that dashed orange line that you see on the map. A lot of these routes parallel existing what we call core or most productive and highest demand routes. But we're also looking at what we call transit emphasis corridors. These are major state highways or arterial streets that run east-west continuously through the county, where there may be existing service or there may be a lack of service. And that sort of serves as sort of the backbone of our network. So just kind of high level, this is kind of similar to like an airline kind of hub and spoke map, but you can kind of see like the key cities, transit centers in the county, north and south. You have light rail and the major transit centers running south to north there on the screen. Linwood's obviously going to be a big hub. It's kind of like the Chicago O'Hare of our network, and a lot of routes are going to be kind of exchanging passengers bus to bus, but also with light rail. Montlake Terrace will have a lot of heavy duty connections. This is 15-minute or better service on weekdays, as well as the Swift Blue Line extension to Shoreline North Station in King County. So what's really interesting is, as Rick was mentioning, a lot of our commuter routes are obviously going to get remodeled and rebooted, and that allows us to kind of rethink them and kind of refresh them and look at data, especially where people are going, getting a lot of input from that. Been talking to some cities initially about this, but kind of, obviously feeding some of these connections from cities south, north, and central county to Linwood, but also looking at the data, there's definitely a large market, a large traffic flow coming down State Route 527 and 522 down 405 to Bellevue, sort of kind of leveraging the market for future BRT in that corridor, but kind of serving people in the interim more directly, and connecting to also to light rail Bellevue, where connections can be made to Redmond and also downtown Seattle. So kind of the other real interesting piece is new service options. That's on-demand transit service within a specified area. This has actually not just been piloted, but is actually in operation in the Puget Sound area currently with Pierce Transit in King County Metro. Relatively new, but they've had several kind of startup projects. The key difference between this and maybe what you'd be most familiar with, like kind of circulator or shopper trolleys, this is accessed via technology. So just much like Uber or Lyft, a customer would use an app to sort of summon the service. There'd be flexible stops and destinations. And our first foray into this is the Linwood pilot project, sort of in the Alderwood Mall area of Linwood, which would be starting up next year. And we plan to sort of kind of use this as sort of like a proving ground, a test lab for expanding this concept, not just in urban and suburban areas, also potentially rural areas in the county. So kind of back to the sort of equity piece, I think a lot of us in the industry are very focused on this. So instead of just kind of looking purely at like ridership, population, land use density, sort of, filtering things through, different demographic factors. So looking at not just the typical, minority populations and income, looking beyond that, looking at population that is foreign born, limited English speaking in the household, and also populations living with disability. So being a bit more expansive beyond sort of the general federal requirements. So for the customer, that's who we're all here to serve. We're basically a means to end. So what are we doing for the customer? So, primary objectives here, reducing waiting time, kind of covering the county with more frequent service, more span throughout the day, more hours of the day. Our service kind of, really scales down after about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and, other, opportunities, whether there be, jobs with swing shifts, or actually, light rail service in general, it's operating throughout the day almost to midnight. So expanding that kind of footprint of a service, more reliable and faster service, kind of at the bottom of that pyramidal kind of figure I showed with light rail, BRT, and express route, new routes and new services to more places. And as I was just mentioning, more personalized service app options in certain areas, which would be, app driven and demand responsive. So kind of looking at this very high level, just I was mentioning, kind of service hours is our standard currency and how we look at kind of resources, that those are bus hours that are out there in the timetable that the customer can experience themselves. And today there's kind of a dichotomy where there's a big chunk of that is sort of peak only, peak direction. It's sort of our classic commuter service, with a fair amount of all day service with some kind of limitations in the total span of service throughout the day. With our 2024 network vision, the sort of goal, is to sort of really expand that out all day service and really shrink that peak period or rush hour only service. And this is also informed by data that we see coming out of the pandemic, where there's sort of less of the peak type of demand and more kind of a spread out demand throughout the day. And this allows the mobility dividend to sort of really increase with that sort of expanded access and service level. So as part of this process, outreach is, the primary interface with public. So we're developing much more robust policies and practices around this. We're looking for more meaningful public input. We're sort of really bird dogging our outreach that's active right now, looking at, what's the percentage of people are using, smartphones to access the survey, or desktop. Looking at, being really tactical about which places we go out to actually do field outreach, where we've been really in the past year increasing a lot of work directly with community-based organizations. Much of this is obviously through Zoom meetings, but it's been very effective by creating those channels of communication. And, publishing our entire website and all our materials into 5 languages, and that is English, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, and Korean in our service area. And we want to be gathering input from the entire community, and really not just, folks that are sort of the usual suspects or always engaged in transit or the transit geeks, but really make an intentional focus on populations we have not done well at reaching in the past. So kind of just a recap here is that we're sort of at the kind of tail end here of our phase 1 outreach. Next year in 2022 is where there'll be a lot more details and a lot more input being solicited from the public, with a decision point at the end of calendar year 2022. So as Rick was mentioning, we have an active public outreach process underway right now. It started right before the Thanksgiving holiday. It's open through December 17th, and here are 5 different ways to participate in that survey and also find out more background on the presentation I just gave. And thank you. And here is my contact information if you have any other questions. Thank you.
So just to maybe sum up a little bit before handing it back to Gary for Q&A, we have an opportunity. I mentioned at the top here of a historic nature, given the regional investments being made to rethink our network, to become more robust within Snohomish County. And really the reason for that is we're not going to have to stretch ourselves as far as we have in the past, with Sound Transit picking up the load between Linwood and University of Washington and downtown. Historically that market, serving that market, has consumed about 30% of our resources. So the opportunity we have is to redeploy and reinvest those resources within Snohomish County. And as employers and service providers and nonprofits, we're really looking for your input to guide our work as we think more creatively and in a more focused way about how we can reach more people and bring more people into the transit system. So, our ask is that you think about your customers, your clients, your partners, your employees, and give us your feedback as you're able about how we can incorporate your needs and your thoughts into the work we're doing to create a more robust network here within the county. It's a great opportunity, and it doesn't come along very often. We'll be doing this, this year and next as we get ready for 2024. And we'll do it a decade from now when we get ready for that Everett line to open. That's about how often, you have an opportunity like this to really think differently about your model. So thank you. And I'll pass it back to Gary.
All right. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Rick. Folks, if you have additional questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'm going to start off with asking a few questions of Rick and Thomas, and then, please feel free to add additional questions down low, and we'll try to get to those as quickly as we can. So, Rick, with Thomas's presentation and your comments, there is a question about mergers. And so one of the things I thought about in asking this question was the mega mergers that we always think about. It's Dow Chemical and DuPont, or it's Anheuser-Busch and Miller. And so could you tell me a little bit about the potential, if there are discussions around a potential merger between Everett Transit and Community Transit?
Sure, or Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, for a more local example. Yes, I noted that Tom Hinkson is on the in the audience, and Tom may have some thoughts to share as well. I think those of you who have followed transit closely will be aware, and those of you who haven't, this might be interesting news, that the city of Everett has been looking closely for some time at the future, rethinking the future of Everett Transit. as part of its effort to position the city for long-term success. And the city commissioned a couple of years back some technical work to look at some alternative scenarios for us, trying to figure out a sustainable future for Everett Transit that would result in the level of service folks would ideally like to experience within the city of Everett. And that led to 3 different options, kind of a status quo option, an incremental step forward, and then a more ambitious look at consolidating with community transit. And after that work was done, the city council directed the city staff to reach out to community transit and begin a conversation about, what a consolidation plan might look like. And so we've been having quiet conversations behind the scenes here for the past few months to try to answer that question. And I guess it's breaking news this week that we are going to bring forward an action item, the city staff to the city council Wednesday, and we to our board of directors this coming Thursday to formally commission a joint planning process that would develop a consolidation plan over the next 1.5 to 2 years. So I guess that's the news, is we're announcing that we're formally dating, and we're going to go forward and look at the issues, and there are many, to figure out what the best path forward is if the city decided it wanted to take the step and look at consolidation. I want to be very clear, though, that ultimately the deciders here are the voters in the city of Everett. So where this would play out is in a joint planning effort between the 2 staffs overseen by the 2 policy bodies that would lead to a decision by the city whether to ask the voters of Everett if they want to join community transit. So our work would be aimed at informing those decisions, first by the city council and then by the people of Everett.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that context, and then you diving deeper into that question. An additional question that we have is tied to Northgate. And so I guess what we're wondering is, how are things going with the new light rail connection there? And are customers using the connection, and what's the feedback you're hearing?
Yeah, I might draft Thomas to help answer this question. It's really interesting. There's a kind of a new pattern emerging where we're seeing people doing a lot more mixing and matching. So in the past, you think of a bus route that serves a particular market, and the people in that market use that bus route and nothing else. And they become familiar with and reliant on that bus route. And that's part of their routine and part of their life. And there's not a lot of deviation. What we have now with the Northgate opening is multiple choices for people to get to and from downtown, to and from University of Washington, from Snohomish County. And we're seeing a pattern emerge where they're mixing and matching modes and choices at different times of the day to pick the combination of modes that works best for them. And that's actually kind of cool to see. It's what we all hoped would happen. And I have this sort of vision of people, getting up in the morning, having their coffee, checking their app, and deciding how they want to get downtown, and then doing the same thing in the afternoon, looking at traffic and seeing what's going to be faster. So that seems to be playing out. But Thomas has a more command of the details. So anything you want to add there, Thomas?
Yeah, sure. Kind of elaborate on things like, logistically, it's a whole different operating paradigm, because we're operating buses into a shared facility with King County Metro, which is, a lot of buses. There's buses coming in there every couple minutes, basically, during the peak period. There's a lot of transition of customers, off a bus onto a train via vertical conveyances like elevators and escalators, really kind of dialing in signage. And the world we live in is very much very data heavy because of all the IT stuff. So kind of constantly making adjustments to kind of what the signs on the at the bus bay say, the platform say, and on the bus head signs as well. We're definitely seeing like daily shifts on how customers they might do something different in the morning, and because traffic's really bad coming back, they don't take the bus from Snohomish County back, they take the train to the bus, things like that. And lastly, it's also opened up new connections with Metro within Seattle. There's a pretty good express route that goes to First Hill and South Lake Union directly from Northgate that some of our customers are utilizing. So it's kind of an appetizer of things that come, but it's sort of, we got a big surge of ridership back when the university went back in session, but it's definitely not at the same level it was projected to 2 years ago, just because that big Seattle commute market's pretty down still.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I did see just a few questions in the chat. I wanted to make sure that I gave you a chance to answer those. Christina Strand mentioned that the information was wonderful, first of all, and second of all, are there plans to update the bike services at transit centers, such as repair stations?
That's a great question, and I don't actually know off the top of my head. I know that at the Northgate station, Sound Transit installed a bunch of on-demand bicycle storage. So people can come up, ride up, and tap their Orca card and access a secure storage area or a secure bike locker if they don't want to just use a regular bike rack. I'm not familiar with what other facilities are there as far as repair type facilities. There are going to be similar facilities, I know, at the Linwood station when it opens, because it's adjacent to the interurban trail. And I know that's a question that will get a lot of attention in the planning of the Everett extension as the line gets further extended up the corridor. But we're always mindful of providing bike supportive infrastructure, and Thomas alluded to that in his presentation. We want to make it an easy choice for people to be able to access the transit system with their bike.
Nice. One additional question, I think Thomas kind of highlighted it in his visual, was Marysville. And so the question that we have is, and he talks about the expanding there with the rapid transit there. Yeah.
So that's the next big thing for us in terms of specific projects. Thomas mentioned as well the Orange Line that will be serving the Linwood station between Mill Creek and Edmonds College. That's our third BRT line. And then our fourth BRT line will be Everett to Arlington, basically a 10-minute bus rapid transit level of Swift service, serving Marysville, Arlington, up into the Smoky Point area and the Cascade Industrial Center. So we're going to start planning and design on that project in the new year. So we're scheduling that to sort of taper right after the Orange Line.
Okay. One additional comment was from Terry Cleveland. Talks a little bit about, obviously, our senior population, and especially the lower income faction of that population, lack of access to internet and information in that perspective. The question or comment was perhaps involving the libraries and information system for outreach. Any thoughts on that?
We have a pretty robust partnership with the library system. And, you heard Thomas talk about the work we're doing to try to reach more people. I think at the heart of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work is a focus on reaching people you haven't reached before, and reaching people who may not be able to connect with you in conventional ways. And so our commitment is to push ourselves to do better in that regard, and make sure we're connecting or creating opportunities for connection where they haven't existed before, or where they may be difficult. And so that's the kind of input we're looking for as well, not just where should our bus routes go, but
Right.
how could we better connect with and serve people.
All right, and we have an additional question or comment from Deborah. It looks like just tied to the survey and the ability to add some new ideas from stakeholders. And so wondered about potential to have a space to comment or provide.
I'm looking for that question in the chat. Well,
Current go ahead.
I'll just say this: the survey that's open right now is one way to provide information to community transit. We'll take input in any way you can get it to us. If you want to send us written comment, if you want to have a meeting, this part of the process is to gain sort of an initial casting of the net, if you will, of input to inform the technical work ahead of us. And there will be subsequent rounds of work where there will be additional opportunities for public engagement as we go forward. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and we want to sustain engagement with folks as we go. I know we've had some dialogue with Deborah about the student fares and student fare policy and trying to figure out how to make it easier for youth to ride. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big issue for transit nationally, is really taking a hard look at fare policy and trying to figure out what's the right balance between our fiduciary responsibility as stewards of public tax dollars on the one hand, and institutional barriers on the other, and what's the right balance there. So again, that's an area where we need to be open to input, feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rick. As you and I have talked about our historic experiences in Washington, D.C. So I would take the train and the bus to and from, and to access better education in the Maryland area. And so I know that community transit is providing that potential opportunity for students and young adults looking for new opportunities. And that's why we have our tagline, which is "Opportunity lives here," because we know community transit can create that opportunity. And another question that I have here, or actually a comment from Tom at Everett Transit, was mentioning that they had added, 20 on-demand lockers at Everett Station. And I think that was an answer to another question.
Yeah, that's bike facilities.
And then Jeff Massey, he has a question about, in the chat, SR9 is currently underutilized. Do you see that changing?
Underutilized or overutilized? It's a bit of a challenge from a level of service perspective, and it's going to get worse as the Cascade Industrial Center vision comes into reality. That's one of those markets our board of directors has expressed some interest in, because as we start to see more jobs up in that Marysville, Arlington area, that's going to add a dimension to the commute pattern where people are trying to get north into that area, and maybe from East County and all parts of the county, frankly. So, that's on our radar screen to take a look at in this process. Thomas, I could put you on the spot and see if you have any insights to offer there about Highway 9 in general, or specifically.
Yeah, it's kind of a emerging market, but looking more of it as like a through route connecting kind of Monroe, Snohomish area up to Lake Stevens into the Cascade Industrial Center area. It's kind of sparse in parts, in between the cities for transit, and curbside accesses can be very challenging, but kind of as a kind of a more of an intercity kind of express market, definitely looking at it.
All right, now I have another question. This is a doozy. All right, so preface by saying that Karen asks, what is your dream service route? So I'd love to hear from both of you, your dream service route.
Wow.
I know that's a tough one. That's a tough question.
Yeah. Well, I would love to have a Swift network that, my dream service route is really a network. It's a Swift BRT network with dedicated right of way and terminal stations in all of our, medium and large size cities. That makes transit an easy choice for anybody. So we're working toward that incrementally. And then take that network and have it connected to the regional system so that people can really go anywhere they want to go without necessarily having to take the car out of the driveway. Thomas, do you have a favorite route, a dream route?
Yeah, kind of jumping on that kind of, like a backbone network of high frequency local kind of Swift like routes, especially where access barriers are minimized. I think the killer app of Swift is actually level boarding and, not having to, step up, step down, even a few steps is a huge deal, whether you have a wheelchair, stroller, or stuff with you. So it's, that's kind of that customer experience. And in having, of course, the fully more built out kind of regional network coupled with some of this more modern, still evolving technology things like micro transit, which might one day be autonomous. Who knows?
All right, I like that. I think there's opportunity for more conversation in that space. So my brother from another nonprofit, Steve Corsi, has asked from Volunteers of America, what would it take to have senior centers added to the non-electric distribution for information on routes and services available? So that is probably down in the middle of the chat section, Steve.
Yeah. I think Mary Beth and Thomas put some contact info in there, and the survey has a field for people to get added to a electronic distribution list for updates and meeting notices. So that's probably the fastest way.
Gotcha.
But you can call or email any of us and we can see to that.
Awesome. And then Thomas, I didn't know if you were going to chime in there or not, but okay. So one additional question that I have, gents, is what types of clean energy, sustainable initiatives have you undertaken?
I mentioned it briefly off the top that we've just kicked off a zero emission vehicle study. And so that's a big initiative for us. It sounds kind of modest when you say it out loud, but we have, we operate a fleet of over 300 transit coaches and then several hundred more, paratransit shuttle and van pool vehicles. So we have a really enormous fleet out there that is all gas and diesel powered, with a few exceptions. We've got some hybrid buses out there, and we've got some supervisor vehicles that are hybrid and electric. But this is a real opportunity for CT to take a look, pardon the pun, under the hood at our carbon footprint and figure out how we can be sustainable long term. The infrastructure law that Congress just passed, I can't understate its importance. The federal government has devoted, on top of all of its existing programs, an additional $30 billion over the next 10 years for transit agencies like ours to begin converting fleet from diesel to electric. Not just the actual coaches, but the infrastructure necessary to support their operations and maintenance. So we are taking a deep dive into the state of that technology to plan out how it could fit with our network and with our service plan, with an eye toward making that transition and doing our part to help address climate change here in the Northwest and hopefully have a more sustainable operation going forward. These vehicles and this technology, it's expensive. And so, figuring out how to make the initial investments and then make the finances work over time is a big key, and that's a lot of what we're going to be looking at. So that's probably the big thing that we're initiating. I think beyond that, I have an interest in community transit becoming a certified sustainable transit agency. The Federal Transit Administration has a program for agencies to develop environmental management and sustainability systems, and then get certified as a sustainable organization. So that's something that I'm interested in articulating in our long range plan update as a commitment we're going to make going forward. So that addresses not only fleet, but all other aspects of a transit agency's operations. So there's a lot there. And it's an area I'm interested in us pursuing as we go forward.
Okay. One additional question about talent and retaining talent. You dig a little deeper on what you're seeing for community transit and thoughts and considerations for that, the impact, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's something that everybody's struggling with right now. The unemployment rate has come down, and the competition for talent has gotten harder. So if you look around at what other transit agencies in the region are experiencing, it's tough across the board. There's vaccination policies that are having an effect, but even some agencies that don't have a vaccine requirement are also curtailing service because of a lack of operators. So we're competing as an industry with all of the shipping and logistics operations that are out there: Amazon, FedEx, UPS, you name it. And it's a competitive pool. So we are constantly recruiting. We are offering training incentives and referral incentives, and doing everything we can to keep the pipeline full. We're focusing on retention, and it's just a constant priority internally to maintain our talent pool and attract more talent as we go forward. I think the most compelling metric I've seen in the last couple of months is, there's, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there's still 7-8 million people out of the workforce sitting on the sidelines because they're either unable or not comfortable to come back to the workforce because of COVID and how it's changed people's lives. And that's still that's a pretty remarkable statement on where we are, within the economy.
Rick, so we're coming to the end of our chat here, excuse me, and I'd like to give you just a little bit of time to provide maybe some additional closing remarks. It's been, as Terry just mentioned in the chat, an amazing presentation from you and Thomas, great details, but what are some parting thoughts that you'd like to share with our coffee chats folks?
Well, let me just build on the comment I just made, and then I'll close out with some broader observations. But we're still in the pandemic. We've been fighting this thing for coming on 2 years, and while we were all celebrating Thanksgiving, we learned about Omicron, the next shoe to drop, and it's just COVID fatigue is a real thing. And, we are constantly talking with our employees and our customers about how they're feeling about COVID and how they're feeling about the direction of things. And it's tough. We've implemented a vaccine requirement, and by the beginning of next year, we'll have a fully vaccinated workforce, which is going to be a huge accomplishment for us, but it's not coming without a price. But it's also responsive to the thing we hear most from customers who have left the system and haven't come back yet. Folks who don't have to go to work are staying at home, they're working from home. If they do go to work, some of them, a lot of them are driving, they don't have to take transit. And the issue there is safety and how safe people feel. So, our commitment is to create the safest possible workplace for our employees and the safest possible space aboard our service by having a vaccinated workforce, by having state-of-the-art technology for our air purification systems, by disinfecting our coaches every day, and making sure we're vigilant about all of those safety protocols. That's the key to bringing ridership back. And, we're trying to position ourselves to be there when the employers start bringing their employees back, hopefully in the new year. That's got to be our focus, keeping the service out there, keeping it safe, and making sure we're there when people need us. With that in mind and that established, we have this opportunity, this historic opportunity to look forward, and to think creatively and with excitement and enthusiasm about how we can up our game here within Snohomish County. We're one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing county in the state. There's so much going on here. This is a place people and businesses want to be. And we want to do our part to help this community thrive. And when a regional agency like Sound Transit invests $3 to $4 billion to get a mass transit line into the heart of our county, we can leverage that to turn ourselves as a local transit agency into a higher performer, frankly, to figure out where we can put that more frequent, more dependable service, to take the time to figure out how to reach folks we haven't reached before. And to help, be part of the county's solution going forward. But we need your help to do that. And so that's our ask in this presentation is go online, show up at some of our online meetings, give us your feedback, ping staff, ask for meetings if you have specific issues you want to dive deeper on, and help us shape the future of mobility here in the county.
That is excellent. I want to thank Rick and Thomas for joining us today. Obviously, Community Transit just hit it out of the park with this presentation, giving us robust information and something to be excited about, because we realize that community transit and specifically our transportation needs are paramount and permeate our lives. So when we're talking about quality of life, access to jobs, growth, expansion, all of the beautiful things that we think about in Snohomish County, we know that Rick and his team have us in mind and our future in mind. So really want to thank you, Rick, for excellent presentation, and Thomas as well. Folks, before we go, I'm going to give you just a sneak peek into next week's presentation, which is also a sneak peek into Imagine Children's Museum. So 8:30 a.m., December 7th, be there, be square. And then last but not least, Katie, if you don't mind, we want to give a thank you to our guests. And if we can everybody open up to your gallery. I know Rick has a drink next to him that has some form of, yeah, there we go. And Thomas as well. Let's hold these up. Anybody want to take an image for Community Transit, please do so. You all have an amazing day. Remember, transportation helps permeate our lives. And we thank Community Transit. Take care, folks. Economic Alliance, Snohomish County.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you.